900 years ago, on a battlefield somewhere in medieval Spain, a knight fell, not a legend, not a storybook hero, but a real man. And centuries later, all that remains is his skull, cracked by violence, distorted by disease, and carrying a mystery written in bone, because this was not an ordinary warrior. This knight fought with a rare genetic condition that reshaped his very skull, and his death was as brutal as the medieval world itself. When archaeologists uncovered this medieval skull, they immediately noticed something strange. The bones were not smooth, not symmetrical. Instead, the cranium was thickened, misshapen, almost swollen. It looked as if the skull had grown unevenly over many years. This wasn't caused by a sword. This wasn't a battlefield injury. This was something much older, something that began in childhood, a rare disorder that altered the way his bones formed. Experts believe the knight may have suffered from a condition such as fibrous dysplasia, a genetic mutation where normal bone is replaced with fibrous tissue. Instead of growing strong and balanced, the skull becomes distorted, thickened, abnormal. In life, this could have caused constant headaches, facial asymmetry, hearing or vision problems, and a visibly different appearance. Imagine living in the Middle Ages with a condition no one could explain. No medicine, no diagnosis, only superstition and survival. Yet somehow, this man lived into adulthood. And not only that, he became a warrior. This is what makes the story extraordinary. Because medieval knights were not simply soldiers. They were trained from childhood, expected to ride, to fight, to kill, to survive brutal combat. So how did someone with such a condition end up on the battlefield? The answer is simple. In medieval Europe, physical difference did not always mean exclusion. If he was born into nobility, he may have still been expected to serve. Armor could hide deformity, status could outweigh weakness, and war always demanded bodies. This skull reminds us, knights were not perfect heroes. They were human beings, with pain, with illness, with flaws. And still, they fought. But the skull tells another story, not of disease, but of death. Across the bone, visible fractures appear. Cracks, breaks, trauma consistent with medieval weapons. This man did not die peacefully. He died violently, possibly from a sword strike, an axe blow, or the crushing force of a mace. Medieval combat was not distant warfare. It was close, personal, a chaotic storm of steel where head injuries were common, even with helmets. A knight could wear armor and still be killed by one perfect udar. In Spain, the medieval centuries were soaked in war. Christian kingdoms, Muslim states, crusades, border conflicts, castle sieges. Knights fought in brutal hand-to-hand combat, and weapons were designed for one purpose: to break bone, to crush skulls, to kill armored men. Even a helmet could not fully protect the brain from blunt trauma. A mace strike could shatter the skull beneath steel, and this knight met that reality. The fractures show no healing, meaning the wounds occurred at the moment of death. This was likely his final battle. And so, this skull becomes more than a relic. It becomes a biography, a story of someone who lived with a rare condition in a world without understanding, yet still stood among warriors. He fought, he survived, until war finally claimed him. His bones carry two truths: that medieval life was unforgiving, and that even those shaped differently could still become knights. Today, centuries later, we look at this skull, and we don't just see trauma, we see a man, a warrior, a life lived under hardship and ended in violence. This is the medieval world, not in legends, but in bone, and somewhere on a forgotten battlefield, a knight with a distorted skull fell, and history never remembered his name. But his remains still speak. If you enjoyed this journey into medieval archaeology and forgotten warriors, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because the past is not silent. It is waiting to be uncovered.